Wildling Press presents How Do I Book? Welcome to How Do I Book by Wildling Press. We like to chat about book writing, book publishing, book marketing, and, of course, book reading. We're trying to help new and experienced authors develop their crafts, widen their perspectives, and learn to get a little wild every once in a while. I'm Christina, and I am here today with a very exciting interview with Cara Badalamenti, author of The Cursed Coven, book 1 in the Cursed Coven series, pronounced she, her, hers. Cara, happy pub day!
Yay, thank you.
Cara's book, Cursed Coven, is out today. So if you don't have your copy yet, that's probably makes sense because it just came out today. But you can order it the links are in the show notes, and we're going to talk a lot about it today. Cara, how are you feeling?
Very excited.
I'm very excited too. This is our first book to come out in, I think, like over a year, because Wildling is sort of new and it takes a long time to make books. So yours is really the first one that we didn't already have kind of going before the company started. And that is just really exciting.
It is really exciting.
Thank you so much for, giving us your book. We're just so happy to have it.
Of course.
Also with us today is Jamie Zachariah, author of Lavender Speculation, which releases on October 17th. So check back for another perhaps interview episode then. Jamie, how's it going?
Hi, thanks for having me.
We're so glad you're here. How did y'all's friendship begin? Because the reason I invited you both on is I was like, a one-on-one interview, totally cool, totally fun. But 3 I've found is like a great number for a podcast, kind of like organic conversation. I was like, let's just do them both because y'all are friends. How did that begin?
I don't know. Jamie, was it that we connected on Twitter or Instagram or something when we found out we were both... It was TikTok. Okay, pubbing through. There you go. We're connected on all the things now, so I don't remember. But I think, we both realized we were pubbing through Wildling just organically. It, I think, came up on our For You pages. And we connected that way. And then one thing led to another. And then we were just talking all the time. And it's been great.
Well, actually, I don't know if you know this, but it was your post talking about Wildling that led me to discover the Wildling to begin with and then submit. And then once I got accepted, I reached out to you and I was like, oh my God. So thank you.
I didn't know that. That's so exciting.
Yeah, I have you to thank for this connection.
Wonderful. Well, there you go. God. Learn something new every day.
And we have you to thank as well, Cara.
Hey, that's what I'm here for.
Yes, we're so excited for y'all's books. They're similar in certain ways. They're dissimilar in a lot of ways. They're 2 totally different things, but they both have purple colors and spooky vibes. And that is enough to hold 2 books together, especially through the fall season and when the authors are already friends. So I'm just so excited that y'all are excited about each other's books. And so y'all have read each other's books, I'm sure, right? One of you endorsed, I forget who endorsed who, but...
I think we both endorsed each other's.
Maybe,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
We read pretty early iterations of each other's work, too, which was nice.
Yeah.
Let me just... I have Lavender Speculation here. Let me just grab my copy of Cursed Coven real fast for reference.
Jamie, that's so cool. I literally had no idea. I thought that we were both just like connecting on the opposite side of it instead of like on the front side of it, which is cool.
Yeah, I think I reached out to you once they got back to me and I was like, hey, I'm also a WP girl.
I love that so much. Okay, so for Cursed, you did endorse each other's books. For Cursed Coven, Jamie said, a refreshingly adult take on the magical dark academia genre. Cursed Coven grips its readers from the first page and doesn't let go. Oh my God. I love that so much.
It's true, though.
It is really true. I mean, the first page is like, well, okay, let's get into a little bit. So, Jamie, why don't you start? Authors, I'm sure you're starting to learn this, are constantly asked to describe their own books. And it can just get a bit fatiguing, especially because of that dichotomy of like, learn about my book, but I don't want to brag, you know? So I was wondering, Jamie, if you would mind giving like a no spoilers synopsis of Kara's book, so she doesn't have to this one time.
Sure. Yeah. Kara's book, Cursed Coven, is a really fun paranormal romance is one way to put it, but it's so many more than that. It's fantasy, it's witchy, it's modern, it's found family, which is probably my favorite aspect of the book. And it's just a bunch of characters who are trying to find themselves and their past and to come across each other in very interesting ways. I'm trying to be as non-spoilery as possible.
I know, it's so hard.
It is really hard.
I mean, we start dropping truth bombs pretty early on.
It's 30%. The first plot twist is 30% of the way into the book, and it makes it really hard to market.
Yeah, well, yeah, totally. I mean, one saving grace is that the whole time that our male protagonist, Leaf, like for the first third of the book, he's lying and saying his name is Michael. But luckily, we know that because we get Leaf's perspective as well. It's dual point of view between, I think, our main protagonist, Octavia, and then our like B protagonist, Leaf, because girls support girls. And she just, you know, has a bit more
Character development. Yeah.
Yeah, like a bit more character development. Like she's the one who has a real drive at the beginning of the book. Leaf kind of has to discover it throughout the book.
Yes.
But Octavia starts and ends the book, you know, as it should be. So yeah, the Cursed Coven starts with a prologue of, you know, the thing that happened, you know, 18 years ago or however long it was. And it's this great tragedy that strikes Octavia and her family and her friends, really. It's their coven, so the boundaries between friends and family in this book they don't exist, basically. Mm-hmm. A lot of Octavia's coven have lost family in this prologue, but they stick together. It's like, whether they're related or not, I feel like it's like comparable all around. Like there's two grandparents, they're not together. But they live together, and all the kids like share these two grandparents. I love them so much.
Yeah, a lot of my inspiration for that really messy dynamic between friends and family and boundaries that kind of continually are crossed over and over and over again was actually from New Girl, the TV show. Because
that's so funny. I've never seen that.
Yeah, because I felt like when I was watching New Girl, I was in college and I was around my friends, and I had a lot of like codependent relationships with like friends in college. And then I joined a sorority, and with sororities, you know, you're your sisters or whatever. And that like, it was a very interesting time to watch New Girl and have my own personal relationships get like a little, you know, too interpersonal. And when I was thinking about like how to create this dynamic for this book, I was like, I really, really liked how messy those friendship lines were in New Girl. How fun would that be if it was New Girl vibes, like found family vibes, but also everyone was magically inclined.
Yeah, like a totally different kind of energy. Mm-hmm. So is that where the idea for this story came from, or were you like percolating on it? So you watched New Girl and you're like, I have an idea.
So no, it was like, this is like, I hate saying this because it makes me like think too much like of Stephenie Meyer's Twilight story, but it literally came from a dream. But I had a dream about like a bunch of witches like living together in a loft in Boston, because I lived in Boston for almost 3 years. So Boston is a setting of a lot of my daydreams because I loved living there. Like the dream didn't really have like a plot. It was just like kind of like a background or a setting. And then I, you know, woke up, and at that point I was kind of like playing around with the idea of actually writing a book. And I was like, you know what would make that setting really cool and dynamic is if, you know, they were magical. One of them lost their magic. And then also they had to interact with their mortal enemy to fight against a common bad guy. And I just thought that added all the different like quirky dynamics that I was looking for. That added a lot of tension and a lot of uncomfy moments, which is what I was going for.
This is blowing my mind. And I don't know if y'all know this, but the two books that Wildling has published so far are both in the Blameless series by E.S. Christensen. The first one's called The Blameless. The sequel is called The Tarnished. And she also had a dream that inspired her book. This is so wild to me.
Yeah, I think when you're sleeping, the creative side of your brain just runs wild. And I mean, honestly, again, it was just like a little nugget, and I obviously had to build around the nugget. But I think that's a really valid way to get your most creative thoughts out, is sometimes in dreams.
Well, and E.S. Christensen definitely also only started with a nugget, because if you read her book, it's like the first chapter is the main character, Bree, princess, running away from some danger in the castle. There's not a mutiny. It's not a boat. What's it called?
Oh, what is that word? A coup, yes.
There's a coup. I'm like, my brain is in pirate mode. It's just mutiny. Our Flag Means Death is coming back this fall, so it's on my brain. And so she's like running. And so E.S. Christensen, her whole dream was just this girl running. And then she woke up and was like so worried about this little girl and was like, what's going to happen to her? I guess I have to write a 3 to 4 book series
to explain why.
To resolve it. Jamie, did you have a dream? I have to know now. Did you have, well, you got short stories. That's a lot of dreams.
Yeah, I have had some dreams that have inspired stories. That's definitely true.
Okay.
My inspiration comes from all over the place, though. And like you said, I have short stories, so each one has its own background.
Yeah,
so we could be here all day, which I won't bore you with. But yes, I definitely have been inspired by dreams.
Awesome. Yeah, learn more about that in 3 weeks when Jamie's Pub Day episode comes out.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I've never had a dream inspire a book, but maybe to me, it's like I work out all of my book problems when I'm driving, and it's like your brain gets so bored, and I'm just like, okay, well, I guess I'll just figure out this plot hole while I'm sitting here on 64.
Yeah. Well, I will say, too, I've had a lot of scenes, including specific scenes in Cursed Coven, be completely inspired from songs and, like, song lyrics. And so that has always kind of been, like, if I'm, like, stuck outlining and I can't figure out, like, what I want my characters to do next, I'll literally step away from the keyboard and just listen to music for, like, a full 24 hours until I find a song that fits a potential next scene, and then it just goes from there.
That's a great strategy. I might have to steal that.
It works so well for me.
So, Kara, how long did it take you to draft this book?
Not nearly as long as any of my other books so far. No, so that was the very first book that I've written since I used to write books and fan fiction in high school and like very early college. And so it had been, like a 6 or 7 year break since I had done it. And once I dipped my toe back in, like once I had this story idea kind of like plotted out, then I became super obsessed and was hyper fixated to honestly a concerning degree. Like I had at that time a full-time job. And when I was writing this, it was also during COVID. So I think that maybe helped me get it done a little bit faster too. Because I really didn't have
fewer distractions.
Yeah, I didn't have anything better to do. But I worked at a children's hospital. And so even during COVID, I was going in. So I would spend, like 8 or 9 hours a day at the hospital. And then I'd come home and like write for 4 or 5 hours at night. And I was like sleep deprived for a whole 2 months. It took me 2 months to write it.
Your husband was like, I'll see you someday.
I know. Oh my gosh. He was so supportive though. I'm really honestly surprised with him. But on the weekends too, like we couldn't go anywhere. We couldn't hang out with family or friends. And he would bring me all my meals up here. Here is where I work and write.
Oh my God. That is a supportive man. Yes.
Yeah. And so he would like bring me breakfast and then like an hour later he'd come get my tray of food and then he'd like bring me lunch and then come get my tray of food. And sometimes he'd come up here and he'd sit on the bed and he'd be like, tell me about what you're writing. And he's just the best. Yep.
Okay, so when this episode comes out, I'm just going to casually play it in front of my husband and see if he picks up any tricks.
Yeah. I'm telling you, it's great. But I will say every other book that I've written since then has been a much slower progression to like start to finish. Like I don't, have the lifestyle of like the lockdown stay at home scenario to be able to support that anymore. But also it burned me out really fast because then I had to take a couple months away before I could even like try to figure out what self-editing was again. But with the other books that I've written since, it's been a much healthier, like I would say like 4 to 5 months start to finish to just do the rough draft, the first draft, and then even longer to do self-revisions. So, and that's my healthy sweet spot. I'm like happy if it takes me 6 months to finish a book. Like I'm writing.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I'm drafting book 3 of Cursed Coven right now, and I anticipate I'm like almost halfway done of just drafting. So I anticipate I'll have it done by the end of the year. And that would have taken me like 6 or 7 months from start to finish.
It is the one, like, it's the best, worst position to be in, I think, an editor of a series. Because it's like, don't tell me anything, but wait, we actually have to talk about the series arc. But wait.
Yep.
Okay, take your time, but I actually need the sequel right now. But take your time. I need it to be final, but wait, we'll work on it. Like, it's it's like the dichotomy.
Yeah, I'll just tell you, this book 3 is proving very, very difficult to draft because I'm trying to, like, tie up loose ends that I started, obviously, in book 1, but also there's a lot of information that we learn that we guess at the first 2 books, and it's really hard, in a good way, in like an intellectually stimulating way, to try and figure out ways to communicate information without info dumping. So like that's what I've been doing right now is really going through each single like chunk of dialogue and making sure that it like truly gets to the point and that it's not it's the most concise it can be, because I don't want it to sound rambly and all that. But it's a lot of information communicated via dialogue, so you just gotta put them in interesting, uncomfortable scenarios to make the reader engaged.
I'm so glad that that's a priority for you, is like avoiding the info dump, because that's probably one of the main things that as like an editor, it's like, we got to get this, we can do this more elegantly. So I can't wait to read the next 2 books.
Thank you. Me too.
Are you a pantser or a plotter?
Oh, 100% a plotter.
Plotter.
So,
for those who don't know, pantser flies by the seat of their pants when they write, don't know where they're going. We'll find out. Plotter, obviously, plots it out beforehand. Or for me, I kind of like get like a chapter or 2, and then I'm like, all right, let's figure this out before I go any further.
Yeah, I think for me, especially since I like walked into this book knowing that I wanted it to be a series, I plotted all 3 books like from the very beginning, like before I even started writing book 1, and that just like was very helpful. But I think where I allow myself to get creative and go wild is in the actual scene, chapter to chapter. So like I might have a general idea of what I want to occur for like a character's arc or like plot development or vibes. Like I know like the type of meat and potatoes that I want out of a chapter, but I don't plot that specifically unless it's like a really important plot point where I'm like, this has to happen, this character has to do X, Y, or Z. And I let, again, like kind of the music inspire, because I always listen to music when I write. I cannot have it silent. And whether it's instrumental or I can even listen to like lyrics or whatnot. So I'll like sit down, I'll read my outline, I'll know like generally what needs to happen in this chapter. And then I just let the music flow. I find the right song that feels right. And then I let my creative juices flow. And that's where I allow myself to pants a little bit. But overall, like chapter to chapter, I know what is supposed to happen during that chapter. And like how I get there is up to me in the moment.
Yeah, I love that. A little column A, a lot of column B. Do y'all ever like put on a song and then in your head you pretend it's like a trailer for like the movie of your book, and you're like, this is gonna look so cool maybe someday if it ever gets a film adaptation?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Jamie, are you more of a pantser or a plotter? It's a little different with you because of the short stories. You don't have like a whole like 3 series arc going on, or 3 book series arc.
Yeah, my stories are so short. Like they're short stories, but some of them are short enough to even be considered like flash or microfiction. So it's so different.
You got some that are like a page, and then you got I think the last book, the last story in the book is like 25 pages or something, but that one's really long.
I think I'm a plotter.
Cool.
I kind of think you probably, I've never written flash fiction. Like even back in my Wattpad days, I was like writing, like 100,000 word stories. But I really think that you have a skill that I honestly couldn't dream of. Like that's like your skill is like a flash fiction writer or a short story novelist is like my goal. Like I'd love to be able to do as much as what you do with fewer words and make it feel just as impactful as like having had read an entire 3-act story. So I am really, really jealous of your hardcore skill and talent, because I feel like it's easier in a way to fill more space than it is to fill less space and get the same emotionality out of it. Yes. So anyways, I loved reading your work. I was like amazingly jealous of you when I was done reading it. I was like, gosh darn, she's good.
That is so kind. Thank you. And I admire your ability to talk about the same characters in the same situation and make it continuously more interesting. I have such struggle in myself to lengthen things and not make it sound repetitive, but you're able to make someone see more of a character, their development, the plot, and it just kind of, you want to keep reading. And that's something I really admire about your work.
Oh, thank you.
I'm
we
about
love
to cry,
each other.
y'all. Yes.
No.
This is why I brought both of you on. Oh, God. Okay. Both of you, I want to know, who is your favorite character in the Cursed Coven? Not, next question is the character you identify most with. So not necessarily who, but who is your favorite character?
What if it's the same?
Well, that's okay.
Because I like June.
Oh, June.
I love June.
Cute.
Just wait. You're going to love her even more in book 2, Jamie. I think you're really, really going to enjoy June in book 2.
So June is Octavia's lifelong friend and coven mate, and she specializes in potions. And she's very nice, and she's always just kind of like vibing with her potions, being a kind person.
She really is. She's
Whenever
like,
they need to be friendly, Octavia's like, send June. I got nothing.
she's the mediator for sure. Like, she is definitely that mediator.
She's the one that you like don't like. Octavia's always worried about like disappointing her friends and family, and June is more than anyone else the one you like don't want to disappoint, you know.
Yeah, she's the moral compass for sure. Yeah, that's really, really hard for me. I mean, I think, especially now that I have book 2 written and under my belt, I really think I have to say Octavia is my favorite, just because the plight that she goes through and the like sheer level of sacrifice that she will have had to have made by the end of this series is just really something. And I can't help, I can't help but respect her for just like how far she's willing to go. Like, I think about that sometimes. I'm like, how far would I be willing to go for myself and for the people that I love? And I hope it's like a fraction of as far as how, far she ends up going. So yeah, I just mad respect for Tavy, man. She's a bad bee. I love her.
Yes. You're allowed to say bitch on this podcast.
Okay. She's a bad bitch.
Our rule is PG-13, so you can get in a hell, a damn, a bitch, but
okay.
Category A swears, maybe not.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Okay, so my favorite character has got to be Sage. I mean, a non-binary, overpowered, like, chaotic human being. Like, their outfits are incredible. Their dialogue's incredible.
I have to tell you, yeah, Sage was I think Sage was the first character where, like, character design and, like, personality and vibes, like, it was set in stone. Just like from the first thought of it, and they were just going to be a superstar from the very get-go. Like, it took me a lot longer to like design the character, like the 2 main characters, the love interest and Octavia, whereas like Sage was just like came to me so easy, and I was like, they're going to be great. Yeah.
Oh my god, I love it so much. So Sage is the descendant of like a kind of notoriously powerful family of elemental. I almost said magicians, but you know what I mean. Magic users. And so they do elemental magic, which we definitely haven't really explored all that they can do, but we get some cool, like water, some cool fire action. I'm excited to kind of explore their talents a little bit more. And I noticed that we all 3 picked characters from the Coven rather than from the witch hunters. I think partially because the witch hunters obviously start out, they're enemies. And so it's like, okay, well, maybe don't murder our beloved characters. But then the witch hunter group has just so much more. I mean, their whole world gets rocked and destroyed throughout the series of this book. So they don't get as much time to just be themselves. They're like going through it. So I hope that in the next 2 books, we get to see more of them not going through trauma, maybe different kinds of trauma, being able to be themselves a little bit more.
I will say, you said, like, who's your favorite character? But then I think you were going to ask next, like, who do you identify with most? Yeah, yep. For me, that's super, super easy, Delta. Delta has...
the bitch.
Yeah, Delta has some trauma that, like, I can identify very significantly with. So, like, writing her was a little bit easy, too. Only I had her react to the trauma in a 180 different way than I did growing up, which was honestly, like, really, really fun. to explore like what that could have been like if I had let myself
cathartic for you.
Like if I had let myself respond the way that I kind of always wanted to, but like never felt like comfortable doing so. So yeah, I identify with Delta a lot, and I really, even though she's a very dislikable and hard to swallow character, I actually like her so much because her character arc throughout the entire series is so fun. Like, it blows my mind. Like, I am just, like, writing her, and especially in book 2, writing her has been such a joy. So I love her to bits, and identify with her a lot.
You get to answer with the whole series in mind, but Jamie and I are just like going off book 1, so we have a lot less to work with.
I really thought, that I was going to get a lot of like negative reviews on that character, because when you write a truly unlikable character, you're going to get like a lot of mixed reviews from readers. But I'm really pleasantly surprised to say that I have had like 3 early readers like reach out to me and tell me how much they love Delta. And I was like, wow, I was not expecting this to like hit home. They were like, yeah. She was like so mysterious until you like find out the reason why she is. And that really rang true for me too. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, well, I guess it's not just me. That's great.
Yeah. So Delta is Leaf's, adoptive sister, and she comes from trauma just like the rest of them. And she also is raised in this adoptive family with 4 dudes. Mm-hmm. Like, she has 3 brothers and a dad. And it's like, yeah, she's a bitch, because how else could she possibly have made it through her upbringing? So I love that for you. Jamie, you said June is the character you also identify most. So I totally see that.
I do want to shout out to Leaf, though, because I like how you wrote Leaf. I think a lot of times I find the way that like cis straight men are written unrelatable or one-dimensional, but your book doesn't do that, and especially not with Leaf. So I really enjoyed his character development and the way he interacts with the others, especially Octavia. I don't want to give anything away, but turning some tropes on their head there, and I love that. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to see his character development as the series continues.
Thank you. Yeah, and I was really anxious, honestly, about making it dual POV, but because of that reason, writing it
adds so much depth to the story.
I think that's the preferred way that I like to read romantasy, fantasy romance. But I was really nervous about doing individuals who identify as male a disservice, because I have not lived through that identity. I don't really know what it's like, but I felt like if I was going to give it a stab, I wanted to make the character as dynamic and well-rounded and full of emotions as the next person, and try to really attack it from like a human being perspective. And so I am glad to hear that hit home, because I really like belabored over that. And another thing that's hard too is when you're writing kind of like that enemies to lovers. My hang up when being a reader has always been, like when that love interest is a little too unredeemable, and so like walking that line of somebody who is in more of like an enemy role and is planning or has done really kind of negative or, undesirable things in their life, how can they be the point of desire then moving forward? So writing a good guy or a good person into an enemy's role has always been something that I think I'll always struggle with, even though it's one of my favorite tropes. But I hope that with Christina's help, because that was something I needed help with Christina on, was making sure that he was a good enough guy for the romance to make sense at the end of the day.
Right. So. Yeah. Because their relationship goes through its own arc. And I think that, having every step of that arc be clear to the readers really helps keep his character redeemable. Mm-hmm. And I want to remind you, Kara, that you were talking about being worried about the male point of view. So when Wilding receives, a couple hundred submissions a year, and I don't read a couple hundred books a year, we send them around. We split them up among the staff, and actually Michael, the only dude on our team, is the one who I sent Cursed Coven to, and he is also gay. So he's like, he's a dude and he's not straight. So it's like, maybe this isn't written like for him, but he's the one who was like, this is really something. We need this. So it spoke to him anyway.
That makes me happy. I'm so glad to hear that. I will say, too, I've had a couple early readers who identify as male, and so far, like really good feedback from them, too. So that was also very, very gratifying, very validating. So.
Yeah. I personally identify most with Leaf. Honestly, like I'm the oldest kid. Am I in charge because I like it or because I just always am in charge and I'm just good at it by now? Having to make hard decisions and walk people you love through hard times. And also the way that magic ultimately manifests for everyone in this story. I related to that as well. Oh my God. No spoilers, no spoilers. It's like the most vague language. There is really magic hard in this book and I like it.
Yeah.
What was the hardest scene in this book to write?
That's a good question. I think it was the ending, and I think that finale scene is multiple chapters. And I think the reason why is, again, with the info dumping, you want to try and make the big reveal really interesting, really engaging. You want, and it's a big scene. All the big players, all the main characters are present in that scene. And to make every single character feel present and there in the moment and to have like a purpose in the scene instead of just being like a fly on the wall, that was a big struggle. And I think during the editing phase, you and I worked really, really hard on that ending to like really make it as like fast-paced and concise as possible, so that way the reader will keep wanting to turn the page.
Yeah, and you want them to not be able to put it down for the last 50 pages. Exactly. And I think your book totally has that.
Thank you. But not without your intervention and your help, because that was something that I think the very first iteration of the rough draft really, really struggled with because I just didn't have those skills yet. But now, book 2, and I keep wanting to plug it so that way people get excited to keep reading the series. But in book 2, the cast gets larger and we have other covens coming to be, engaged in the plot. And that problem has only since grown, because now I have a bigger cast, not infinitely bigger or like exponentially, but it's like 5 more new characters, and that making them all feel like they had purpose in group conversations and that they were all just like those things couldn't happen without them. That even just during the drafting was a struggle. But I think with what I've learned from book 1, I think I've done a better job implementing that in the draft. You'll have to let me know.
Yeah, because there were a couple scenes in the first book where it was like, these characters are just sitting here. Let's let them go get a coffee or something instead.
Yeah. Yep.
When do I get to read the second book?
I know.
Yeah, it's drafted. I mean, hey, I would take your critique partner thoughts at any point in time. So yeah, I can email it to you.
Yes. I just can't wait to read it. So, Kara, when we first started working together, you told me that you intentionally plotted this series such that your first book was a little bit more straightforward, a little bit, I don't want to say simpler, because, God, it is not simple, but just, a little more straightforward.
It is, though. Yeah,
simpler.
I would argue that it is simpler.
Because you said you wanted the opportunity to develop your skills before moving on to these much more complex sequels. What do you feel like you've picked up, and what do you feel like you're taking with you into these next 2 books?
Yeah, I think that I have what I hope to have mastered a little bit better is the ability to foreshadow and tease characters' intentions that may actually be like opposing their actions and or their dialogue in a way such that when you reach the reveal, you go, oh, this has been leading up to this the whole time. Like if you think about like Game of Thrones, kind of like the Daenerys Targaryen has her, like fall from, mental wellness and, her whole arc kind of makes sense after the fact. Like that's been my whole goal with the arc of book 2. I wanted to kind of slip things in that make all the characters' actions make sense by the finale, by like the end scene. Yeah. And my goal is that the reader will read it, throw the book across the room, an hour later come back, pick the book up, and look for all the clues. You know what I mean?
Or just start at the beginning again.
Yeah, and just go, wait, hold on. I feel like I was missing something that I didn't realize I was missing. And I think the plot twist that I write in book 1 are a lot more like kind of in your face. And I think doing that was really, really helpful for book one. But I think it helped me build skill to be able to be a lot more subtle and hopefully in book two have plot twists that nobody really sees coming. But then they're able to look back and be like, oh, I perhaps, could have had seen that coming if I had been looking a little bit harder. So that's my goal, at least. We'll see if it pans out.
That makes sense for readers, too, because if you're just dipping your toes into a series, you don't want to have to, you kind of want it to be a little easier to digest so that you can get invested in the characters before you enter the further complexity of the sequel.
Right. And I think with book two, too, I wanted character motivations to be a little bit more muddy, and I wanted there to be a lot more internal strife and conflict. So the tentative title for book two is called Cursed Conscience. And I chose that really, really purposefully because majority of the conflict is internal in book two for a lot of the characters, not just the two POV characters, but in book one, a lot of the conflict is external. There's still internal conflict, but it's just it's not so much in your face. Whereas book two,
it's about the Coven kind of figuring out who they are and what they're doing. Yeah,
book two really changes perspectives in that sense, in that, they're all together, they're all learning, they're all becoming that like really strong knit found family, but they're still struggling, and it's perhaps even harder than before. I will say though, the finale, there's a big external bad, so like there's definitely both, but it's just the vast majority of the book is a lot of internal conflict.
Awesome. What's the main message that you hope readers take away from Cursed Coven, the first book?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think for me, the take home is always going to be, you have to find ways to love yourself as you are, because if you're constantly fighting against developing some kind of level of respect and adoration for yourself, you're going to end up in a situation that maybe perhaps isn't what you wanted at the beginning. Like you're going to end up a little bit worse off. I think everything in life can be tackled a little bit better if you have respect for yourself and you can own up to who you are, where you are in that moment, and just accept yourself. So I think for me.
I love that. Awesome. Anything to add, Jamie?
Yeah, well, that was perfect. But I would also add not to be afraid of change, because change can be scary, but it's inevitable. And when you have a support system around you, you should sometimes embrace it, even though it's scary.
Yeah. For me, there's also a bit of like, you're in charge of your story. That's what I always tell people. Like, I'm a very confident person. And whenever people are like, how are you so confident? I'm like, I decided to be, you get to decide what kind of person you're going to be and what kind of life you're going to live. And I think that a lot of this is kind of all of the characters coming to terms with the fact that they can change it. And kind of tying back into what you said, Jamie, that they're in control and they can make changes if they see fit.
Yeah. Love that too.
To wrap up the episode, let's do a little bit of like a wild round of random questions that don't have anything to do with Cursed Coven. But I want to know, both of you, first thing that pops into your head, what's your favorite color?
Purple.
No surprise there.
Pink.
Pink. Okay. That makes perfect sense because, Kara, first of all, not only is your book purple, but your main character's bedroom is completely purple.
I'll tell you, I tried really hard to write Octavia in a way that was dissimilar to me, just purely for entertainment on my end. I didn't want to write somebody that was exactly like me. I didn't find that stimulating at the time. But I will say the one self-insert thing that I did write was my purple bedroom growing up. Like, I describe it exactly how it was when I was growing up. Purple wallpaper, purple curtains, purple bed sheets. The only thing that wasn't purple was the carpet. And I don't know why, but it just felt right for Octavia. I was like,
this is it too.
I was like, yes, yeah. And I grew to hate it too. So yeah, I was like, this is like the thing that feels right to give her from my life.
I love that. I also had a purple bedroom as a child. Purple walls, purple comforter. I had like flowers painted on the wall. So relatable. Yeah. And Jamie, you have off and on had pink hair, so that tracks, right? The pink, you got your pink glasses, so those are probably my two favorite colors too. So yay. Do y'all reread books ever, or are you a one and done?
I do reread, but I'll tell you, especially since I hopped on the audiobook game like in like 2019, I prefer to read a physical copy or a digital copy first, and then when I reread, I listen to the audiobook. So
yeah, I've been exploring that too. Like recently, I've been going through all of Austen's books, which are take a lot of mental, as much as I love them, take a lot of mental energy to read with your eyes. But if you read them with your ears, that's just kind of like an old British lady telling you a funny story. It's a lot easier.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What about you, Jamie?
I would say generally I don't, but there are a few favorites that I do reread. Classics that I love: Haunting of Hill House, Dracula, Little Women, like my comfort books.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't reread, no.
That's totally cool. When I read a book, I'm like, do I want to read this again? If not, I just get rid of it. I give it to a friend who I think would like it. I put it in a little free library. And then the books that I have decided to hold on to, I try to read them at least once every 5 to 10 years to make sure, to be like, do I still feel the same way? Right. And a lot of the time I do. Sometimes I don't. And I'm like, okay, well, 15-year-old Christina, I'm glad you liked this. We don't need to hang on to it anymore.
Yeah.
Do y'all have a book that you have read that you think no one should ever read? Maybe like a classic or a very, maybe not like a cute little indie author, but a very powerful author or someone historical perhaps.
Do you mean no one should read because it's not good?
Because it's terrible or... Okay,
ooh.
I'll go first. My book that no one should ever lay eyes on is Lolita by Nabokov. That book is horrid. It's horrific. I read it because I had to understand, and I will tell you, I don't. It's horrible. Burn it. Burn every copy. Horrible.
I think personally, a book that I will never, or an author I will never allow myself to pick up again, just because it just wasn't written for me. The content just wasn't for me. And coming from the Midwest, it was just even more of a struggle. But Mark Twain just isn't my jam.
Okay.
But if I was going to go more global and say, like, I would actively tell people, you can skip this one. Like, you don't need to read this particular, like, classic. I would say Crime and Punishment. Like, I ended up reading it in an AP English class. And it was just, that was, like, I've never read a book before where I've actually wanted to, like, stick pins in my eyes just because it was so unfun.
Yeah.
But that was the one. So if I would advise people, I'd be like, you can skip that one. Like,
skip. It's just annoying because there are a lot of classics out there that are extremely wonderful, and it just seems like high schools never pick those.
Yeah.
Jamie?
It's so hard because I'm a big believer in everybody having different tastes. Like, personally,
Yes.
I do not like Steinbeck's books. I cannot jive with those. But I know that they speak to a lot of people. Wuthering Heights. I know people love that book. I think
that one's
it's terrible. I think the characters are just the worst.
A book where every character is deeply hateable it's really hard. Who are we rooting for? I hope you all die. Like, I hope you all fail.
Yeah. I think in general, I would say, and it's not a book, but a trope, if you'll allow me.
Okay.
I hate when abuse specifically of women is written in for no other reason than because the author does not know how to make a woman relatable. And there are stories about abuse that are stories that need to be told. But there are so many times where I've read a book where it's just shoehorned in for no reason. And it feels really disingenuous. It feels really misogynistic. And if I read something like that, I will not read anything else by that author.
Yeah, it's like written for the spectacle of it. It's like it's not written to say anything new. And I feel like a lot of male writers would have trouble even trying to say anything about a scene like that, you know?
Yep.
Very good answer. Kara, I know you love anime. I don't know about you, Jamie. What's your favorite anime?
This is a really hard question. So a lot of like my story writing education came from anime or continues to come from anime. I think that mangakas and manhwa writers are just some of the best storytellers out there. So if we're talking about like, and I straight up have this list like on my iPhone, but I feel like there's so much nuance to it. The greatest like story in anime that I have identified with the most and have felt the most emotions from is Naruto. So it's like the entire Naruto franchise. That's a big one. Like that's from when we were young.
Yeah.
But the more recent, based on like some of my favorite character arcs that I have ever had the pleasure of reading and watching, it's going to be My Hero Academia. The rivals to friendships, and if you're a fan fiction shipper like I am, to lovers, but it's not canon.
Right.
But the rivals to friends arc in My Hero Academia is the best I've ever seen. Like my goal one day is to be able to write like an enemies or rivals to lovers arc that is a fraction as good as that one. And then one that's recent and actually a character that was my like character design model inspiration for Leaf is Jujutsu Kaisen. So that's one that's like airing right now week to week. Their new season is out and it has my whole attention. Like I am super obsessed with Jujutsu Kaisen right now. But also because I love Gojo, because Gojo is the blueprint for Leaf. So
awesome. Okay, those are some really excellent recs. Jamie, do you like anime?
I don't think I've really watched a lot of anime.
That's okay. I designed this question for Kara.
Yeah, I do like Sailor Moon. I'm one of those astrology
Sailor Moon is
girls.
epic.
So
yes,
yeah.
I would like to get into more. I haven't read that much like manga either, but I do love Junji Ito because he's like a master of horror. So if there were shows that were reflective of what he does with his writing and his illustrations, I would absolutely check those out. So
yeah, there's some new ones out right now, Jamie, that they're considered kind of like the dark trio is what they're called in the anime community. But they have a lot of really good either just generalized horror or, like gore, body horror type stuff. They are written in a much more modern and tasteful way with female characters that are actually well written instead of just being caricatures. And so I'll send you the list of those three because I think if you were going to dip your toes, they would probably be closer to your interests and also less problematic. Because I will say, unfortunately, a lot of manga and a lot of anime of the past is pretty problematic.
Yeah, it's kind of like reading classics. It's like you kind of just have to go in knowing that it's part of this thing. And either you see past it or you don't. Like, I'm always like, Agatha Christie's great if you can get over the occasional peppering of racism. Okay, do you use GPS to drive around your town and other places you're familiar with, or do you go from memory?
No, I'm horrible with directions. I don't even, this sounds really embarrassing because I have a master's in a science degree and I've now written a book, but I straight up still don't really know my left from my right. Like, I struggle with it all the time.
Me too. Oh my God. Like, I just can't. If especially if I'm navigating for my husband when he's driving, I just point. Like, I'm gonna get it wrong.
Yep.
If I say it out loud, east and west, I have the same trouble.
Yep.
When I was in high school, I wore Converse every day because 2007, and I had L and R written on my shoes.
Honestly, that's such a smart idea.
I'm like 30 though, and I'm like, I can't still be having that on my shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really struggle with it. My husband and I are both very directionally challenged, so people hate driving with us.
Okay,
but
so
yes, I use
important.
GPS all the time for everything. Yeah.
Jamie, you use
yeah,
GPS?
same.
Yeah, okay.
I'm terrible with direct. I'll get lost coming out of a store in the mall. Like, I won't know if I went
malls are really
right
confusing.
or left. Yeah.
Do y'all have any other witchy, YA, urban fantasy books kind of like Cursed Coven that you would recommend?
Yeah, I have some on my TBR right now. Let me remind myself of the title of this one.
One is The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. Very, very beautiful book. I felt deeply seen by that book.
It's funny that you just said that because the book that I'm about to plug that is on my TBR, I got it as a verbal recommendation from my local indie bookstore. I am really close with the booksellers there and they know what I like. And so they recommended this. It's also by Rachel Griffin. It's her most recent release. It's called Bring Me Your Midnight. And it is a gorgeous hardback version of the book. And so I have that on my nightstand right now. It's probably going to be one of the ones that I read next.
Awesome. Rachel Griffin. Another one, it's speaking of manga. I read this manga, it was like 10 or 12 in the series maybe, called Bizengost by M. Alice Legros. And it has like dark academia vibes. It's about this town that's kind of like, there's like a big mansion nearby that's like deeply haunted by ghosts. and the main character gets wrapped up in trying to like help all those ghosts move on so that they stop haunting her town.
Nice.
It's really fun. It has a lot of like really fun outfits, you know.
Yeah.
And each of the different ghosts is really interesting and fun. So I definitely recommend that one.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. I actually love like haunted stories.
Hell yeah.
Some of my faves.
The last one I'll recommend is Akata Witch by Nnedi Okorafor, which is set, I'm so sorry I forgot where, set somewhere in Africa. And so it's like a totally different sort of magic system than we're used to seeing in fantasy, which was really, really cool. They talk about like juju and stuff like that. And it is also like contemporary. And so it just, it's for a bit of a younger audience, but I think it's still YA. But that one was really fun as well.
Sweet.
You guys know I like my stuff dark and spooky, and I really like colonial New England witchy stuff. So like the Year of the Witching or Slewfoot. Those are probably some of my favorites.
Oh, hell yeah. Okay, so all of those books will be linked in our show notes, as well as pretty much anything else that we've recommended today. The last question on my list is what's next for Cursed Coven, but we've mentioned the sequel only like 1 million times this episode.
Sorry.
So I think people are aware. Definitely get the book today. You can get it. It's linked in the show notes. You can get it from anywhere you buy books online. Follow Kara so that you can stay abreast of the updates of regarding the series. And stay tuned for more about Jamie and Lavender Speculation coming out in a couple of weeks. We'll have an episode about that as well. And you can pre-order her book today as well. Thank you so much, Jamie, for joining us. And thank you, Kara, for writing this wonderful book that we get to celebrate today on its birthday.
Of course. Thank you for, having me, and thanks for taking a chance, pubbing me.
And that's how you book. This episode was edited by me, Christina Kahn. Our logo was designed by Michael Hardison. Our theme music was produced by Jason Hilton. Please check out the show notes for a link to the accompanying blog post and visit us online at Wildling Press on social media or at wildlingpress.com.